Precision journalism is a classic globally, but it all started with you in 1967. When did you start getting acquainted with computers?
When I registered at K-State, I had to write around, fill out the information on IBM cards and write around the little holes. So they were using counter sorters then, not computers, but the IBM counter sorter, which was an old technology, almost 19th century technology.
Wow.
And that was my first awareness of modern data processing.
So when you applied to Harvard to get the Nieman, did you say anything about the use of computers or social science techniques? Or
Oh yes.
what was it that made you think like that?
It was a dystopian novel about the future where politicians use computer simulation to predict how various statements and policies will affect the electorate. And the timing put me at Harvard at just the moment when higher level computer languages for doing statistics in political science were available. And they were teaching computer programming to sophomores because it was possible with this higher level language called Harvard data text. And that was really the genesis of precision journalism.
There are some riots in Detroit in 1967. You start to see things with different eyes maybe than you had a year earlier perhaps.
Yes.
Can you describe sort of the intellectual firmament of what was happening here?
Right. The riot happened. It started on a Sunday morning, very early. And on Wednesday, Jack Daniels, who had been my city editor in Miami, was now executive editor of the Free Press, called and said, "Our staff is exhausted. I need 2 fresh bodies. Send me 2 people." I was the one who answered the phone, so I got to send myself. Wow. And Saul Friedman. And that night, I was in the middle of the riot area, riding in a National Guard truck, looking at the flames, hearing shots in the night, and trying to piece together what was happening. And so I covered it with traditional shoe leather reporting for the rest of that week. And then by Sunday, when the riot had been quieted, we were sitting around the newsroom trying to figure out how to do the follow-up, because we knew this was Pulitzer material, and the Detroit News was thinking the same thing. We were trying to think how to be one up on them. And it just happened that the University of California had finished a project on the Watts riot, which was 2 years earlier, and had just published it. I think the AP carried it that same week. So I waved that around and I said, it took these professors 2 years to do this. We're journalists. We can do the same damn thing in 3 weeks.
The social science research that was done with the Detroit riots that ends up winning the Pulitzer Prize, some coverage had certain stereotypes that even seemed racial in nature. Can you talk about what the presumptions were at the time of these riots, particularly in white America, and newspapers, and maybe even newspapers in the Michigan area, and then what your social science research essentially debunked?
And one of the characteristics of scientific method is that you don't start your research until you have a hypothesis to test, right, and then you try to knock it down. And the nice thing about doing this in journalism is you can test the conventional wisdom as your hypothesis. So all I had to do was, what is the conventional wisdom about the causes of riots? And there were 2, and they were contradictory. But there was a psychiatrist who specialized in the study of violence who said that it was caused by the Detroit riot was caused by the failure of assimilation of Southern blacks who moved to the urban north and couldn't adjust to it. And we could easily test that by just asking people who had rioted and then finding out if the rioters were more likely to be Southern immigrants. And it was just the reverse. It was the people who had been born and raised in Detroit who were more likely to participate than the immigrants. And the other one was called the riffraff theory, that the rioters are at the very bottom of the social scale, and they're the most desperate people who have nothing to lose. And the survey found that riot participation was spread pretty evenly across the socioeconomic strata.
Wow.
So that left by default the third theory, which was called several different things, rising expectations, relative deprivation, that Detroit didn't expect to have a riot because they were making more progress in race relations than other urban cities, parts of the urban north. And that was the source of frustration, because some blacks were getting ahead, but not all, and those who weren't got more frustrated when they saw their peers getting ahead.
My theory about ideas is every new idea is at least two old ideas reconfigured.
Of course.
And you essentially took some social science methods from, say, political science and other social sciences and blended it with the sensibilities of journalism and put it into a new thing called precision journalism, which blended those sensibilities.
That's pretty much the definition of creativity, I think. Relating things not previously related.
That they're not exactly the same, but when you put them together, ooh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. In the digital age, some people think that we don't need journalism anymore because everybody can just dip into the never-ending, never-beginning digital stream and take out what they want. But no, you need journalism more than ever to organize all that information.
That's right.
Only organized information is of any value. And there are two ways to organize it. One with a narrative, storytelling, and the other is with scientific method, hypothesis testing and theory building. And if you can combine those two skills in one team, it'd be hard to do it in one head, but you could do it in one team, then you have something that people will pay attention to and something that could be very influential.